Our first panel is called Long Acquaintances. And this is 3 talks delivered by people who knew Joseph for a very long time. And I hope they, both of our online presenters will be on screen very soon. Let me start introducing them. We have 2 presenters online and 1 presenter in person. In person is the writer, Zinovy Zinik. He is a bilingual writer who writes in English and in Russian. He was born in Moscow and moved to London in 1976. He works as a freelance critic and presenter for BBC Radio, contributing his essays to different periodicals, and now regularly writes to Times Literary Supplement. He is the author of 18 books of prose, fiction, and nonfiction. Just now, you saw on the screen the artist Alex Melamid. I think he will reappear. Where is? Yes. Hello, Alex. Can you hear us?
I can hear you, yes, I do.
Thank you very much for coming. Alex is, well, I don't know, I need to introduce him, but still, I have his biography here in front of me. He is a New York-based artist born in Moscow. He is a co-founder of conceptual thoughts art movement with Vitaly Komo, with whom he closely collaborated from 1967 till 2003. Their works were instrumental for the deconstruction of systems of ideology, and they influenced generations of artists internationally. The works of a duo, Komor Melamid, are held in Museum of Modern Art in New York, Metropolitan Museum in New York, Tate Modern, State Tretyakov Museum, and many, many other major museums and collections around the world. What happened with the image?
What happened to the image?
Oh, at least we've got your voice. And the third presenter today is Emilia Kabakov, an old friend of Joseph. Emilia Kabakov is an USA-based curator artist. From 1988 to 2003, she had been working together with her husband, Emilia Kabakov. Their installations, sculptures, and public projects were shown and are in the collections of many museums and venues around the world, such as Museum of Modern Art, Tate Modern, Guggenheim, Whitney Museum, Venice Biennale, Shanghai Biennale, Mori Museum, Hirschhorn Museum, Pompidou Centre, British Museum, State Tretyakov Museum, Contemporary Art Museum, Antwerp, and many others. Hello, Emilia. Thank you so much for coming. So we planned to start with Alex Melamid, but maybe because logically it would be good to do. Alex Melamid knew Joseph since they were children at school, and yes, here. And I think Alex Melamid, when Joseph died a year ago, Alex wrote a wonderful obituary for Art Forum magazine, and now I think he will tell us about his life with Joseph and about how he knows Joseph and how he actually, I think it was Alex Melamid who brought Joseph into art. Am I right, Alex?
Yeah, perhaps, yeah, most likely. Yeah, I met Joseph, I was about 14 or something, very young, at school, at the local school, and we studied together, and I befriended him, or he befriended me, I'm not sure about that. And let's face it, Joseph was kind of an oddball. A strange person. Of course, it was his stutter, first of all, which made him different from the rest. And he was incredibly shy in his early years, and he was studying some engineering or something which was not clear to me. It's one of his odd, kind of something which made him odd was that he never shared anything with his friends, at least with me. So I didn't know anything about his family life, about his curatorial life, let's say, later on, and stuff like that. And I think it was a tradition, old tradition of Russian dissidents, because they knew that to report on certain people, to spread the rumors was a dangerous thing to do. And what I remember very clearly of him at his briefcase, that was a feature which was carried on through all his life. I think this old and kind of a decrepit, this briefcase was kind of a signature kind of thing of him. So he was not imagined without the briefcase. And I'm sure they changed briefcases. And of course, when he became a known curator in the West, his briefcase became kind of started to be done out of a real leather, because the leather was in high esteem in the late 90s among the curatorial people, people who curators. He tried to emulate the people he met to behave accordingly, because he really never was sure that his behavior is exactly what is in demand. And I've seen his evolution very interestingly. When I brought him first in our house, he was very impressed, and much later on, before and the beginning of his disease, he shared with my mother. He told my mother all the time, Lyudmila Borisovna, that was the name of my mother, I owe you everything. Your house opened my eyes, It was kind of a more affluent house than most of the houses he had seen at that time. And he could meet, kind of a distinguished, let's say, people of culture in the house. And of course, he was very thankful to my mother for that. And that was the most important, I think, of me, that I introduced him to my parents. And I think my parents brought him into the art world. It was not me per se. And what was kept in this briefcase was was totally unknown. He never opened it up. He opened it up once only in these days of the Soviet Union, and was something, some literature which was not censored and which was considered to be dangerous to deal with and to read and stuff like that. But Joseph was afraid, but anyway, he went through that. He was a real dissident, because we had an illusion then that there is a West, okay, and the West is blameless and amazing, and it keeps some amazing secrets of art and life. And we need to decipher these secrets in order to be a normal, civilized people, not the Soviet people. I described in my obituary of him, in Art Forum magazine, how Ivan Chuikov one of the artists, the only one who, as far as I know, or not maybe the only one, but the only one we knew who spoke English, was trying to translate the articles from from Artforum magazine. At that time, the Artforum articles had no meaning whatsoever. It was total garbage, as far as I understand it now. But in a translation to Russian, it was an amazing absurdity, which was, unscribable absurdity. And we were listening very carefully, trying to understand what does it mean, what's the secret of this absurdity. I still wonder what is the secret of the absurdity of the Western art, and I still cannot decipher that, unfortunately. We have to understand that Joseph worked in a time of not a big successes of the Western art. So it was, all the hopes were, put on Russia. So we all hope that Russia, let's say, will move modern art of the world in some directions. Preferably good direction. And that was the hope of the whole generation as soon as we learn what the Western art is. Because, Western art and the miracle of the Western art turned out to be not as miraculous and not as enlightening and not without the corruption and all the sins which are now ascribed only to the Russian art. So of course it was very different, and but still all the sins of humanity are in the modern art as well as every other aspect of our lives in the West. I left Russia very early in 1977, and I didn't follow at all the Russian life at that time, and I didn't follow the career of Joseph at all, despite the fact that I was visiting Russia quite often, because I was visiting my mother, who died 2 years ago at the age of 105. And every time I saw Joseph in Moscow, I could really see the changes, the way he has changed. And it was very revealing, let's say, from this very shy, stuttering young boy, he was becoming more and more important. And at a certain time, he became kind of a big guy, totally different from the image I kept in my mind of his faraway youth. And I understood that's the law of life, let's say, and artistic life in particular, because we all start as young revolutionaries and then become part of this system, which are very different in Russia and in the West, but still have a lot of human similarities. And that was a bad period for our relations with Joseph. But it's always like that, I remember it from my own career that in an article of the New York Magazine, there was an article about a person I know, and I knew at that time, and the writer mentioned me in this article, saying how terrible and disgusting I was, and I got very angry at him. But then later on, I realized that the writer was right. I was disgusting because I had become the part of the system. You see, because what is interesting in the system of the art world here and in Russia is that people in this, the participants are very nice, one by one. But when they got together, they're disgusting. You know, the whole art world is, let's face it, it's a disgusting enterprise. But it doesn't mean that the people there are bad. No, they're very, very, very interesting and very good. But later on, he was kind of leaving the world of the art world, you know, at least psychologically. And he was becoming more and more independent. And he complained to me many, many times how hard his job is, because he needed to get into this marshes of this world, official world of Russia, to get in touch with the people he shouldn't be in touch with. And of course, two major things in the Russian art world and the world at large was this nepotism and corruption. And he was telling me at the very end, he said, I cannot sign these papers. I cannot do it. I shouldn't do it. It's really terrible. You don't understand how bad it is. Well, I don't know how bad it was, because he never shared with me the badness of what he was doing. But of course, his briefcase was filled with a lot of bad material, I put it this way. And what I wanted to say at the end, that Joseph represented the whole era in the Russian life. From the very beginning, the perestroika and the 90s and 2000s, and then we know now that the world in which he lived and proliferated and was so important is gone now. So he was the world of that. He was from the beginning to the end. And it's terrible to say, but I think, I will say it anyway, his death was timely, because he couldn't live in this world anymore. It was too difficult, too complicated, and not really, you couldn't be honest and decent man doing the things any longer. So, and he died. I saw his once. I got his picture done in London, sent to me. It was totally devastating. So this, that's really, really amazing and terrible decay of a human being, and the decay of the whole. When this human being lived, got together.
Alex, thank you very much for your insight. Unfortunately, we've got a very, very tight timetable because we've got so many speakers today. But thank you so much for your insight and on life of Joseph. And also, Joseph, he was trying. I'm really interested in your concept of the West as a paradise, a West like image of freedom back in 1970s, and maybe I pass this question to Zinovy Zinik, to the next panelist, who left Russia in 1970s, in late 70s, so he 75, and who knows very well about this shift and this kind of what was image of the West back in the Soviet Union, and image of the real West. And also you have very good knowledge of dissident circles in Moscow of 1970s, circles that you and Joseph both belong to.
I'm glad that Alex raised this point about the West in the eyes of Soviet non-conformists, I would say, not dissidents, the people who tried to live a sort of different type of life and think differently. And it definitely was idealistic. But I'm here an oddball. I'm a writer, I'm an author. I write fiction and non-fiction too, but basically I'm keen on characters and situations. And I can write being alone. I'm not connected, I'm not linked to any other people, personalities, for writing whatever I like to write, or want to write, or see to write. So it's the difference between writing and doing art, where you are immediately part of the collective. But I had my experience of being in a collective, but on a sort of absurdist parody, minuscule size of it. Because I think for a generation of ours, for Alex and for Joseph Zinik, as he was known among friends, and me and a few others, was the problem of life in this authoritarian, totalitarian regime with its language, a language of monumental propaganda, and a personal relationships. So there were two extremes. There were a life of the street, so to speak, a general street, in general sense, life of the country, of the state, and there was a personal life, which was totally divided from the life of society. But there were no such thing as society, as Maggie Thatcher once put, but it was very true in the Soviet Union. There was no society. There was a state, a bureaucracy, administration, people involved in running the country in one way or the other, communist propaganda. But the time, I'm talking about 1960s, sort of pop art in the Western world, overproduction of goods. The Soviet propaganda was already, everyone knew from top to bottom, was a total dead shell. There were words. So, so-called dissident circles, they were trying to fight this propaganda, taking it as something alien, inhuman, alien to human spirit, to the sense of friendship and freedom, or whatever words they used. And the others would ignore it altogether. But there was a group of people who tried to fight it in a different way, to find so-called the third language, as I put it. And you could do it only in a way by organizing yourself in smaller units. And what we did, and I belonged to two circles. They were opposing to each other, but now I see that they were actually very similar in their sort of background ideology. They were like, I don't know, think about fluxes in New York, or situationists in Paris at that time, 60s, 1960s, 1970s, or Neoists in New York. I mean, people who, I don't know, John Ray, New York School of Correspondence School. The people would get organized, because it was absolutely, in a way, the same sense of alienation from the overall culture, and the people were seeking to find a different language of communication or of art and in writing. So it was absolutely the same process in a way. At least it was an unknown reflection of each other, mirror reflection in a way. So I belonged, I mean, Alex mentioned his mother, Lyudmila Borisovna, who was a very powerful woman. She was a translator, major translator of German literature into Russian. And it was a grand house, many famous acquaintances and friends they had. But we, Alex and his circle of friends, including me, we created our own, that was mainly his idea, with our contribution into it, so-called secret order, which we called ourselves congregation. And we called ourselves citoyens, like in French, citizens. And eventually, out of this parody of a secret order, started certain figures of imaginative personalities emerged, like, for example, Zinovy Zinik, which was a bard, a minstrel, a guitar, romance singer, who was a fictional figure. In a week time, we invented songs, the series of songs on all hot subjects, and I had to perform it. And it's been taken seriously by some circles in Moscow. But anyway, out of all these activities, so-called secret activities of teenagers in a way, a certain conversation emerged. I'm talking about two languages. The language of Soviet propaganda, and that was definitely Melamid idea. It's, in fact, it's not something outside our life while we are involved in our circle of close friends. It actually penetrates, infiltrates every aspect of our lives. So we are part of it, and this Soviet propaganda is a part of our consciousness. And that's eventually all these conversations in which I'm coming to the star of this evening. Joseph Backstein didn't take part. He was constantly present, and discussion about emerging something which was eventually called soc-art was a result of this small circle of friends talking to each other. I wrote an essay, it was the first essay in 1974, summing up these conversations, and it was called soc-art. It was circulating in samizdat, and then taken apart by different people quoting it without quotation marks. It's been published only in Emigre magazine, Syntaxis by Sinyavsky, Andrei Sinyavsky magazine in Paris. And it's taken about 20 years to be published, to get it published in Russia. What I'm driving at, that Joseph was part of this group of people. He frequently present at our gathering of this congregation, of this secret order. He never said anything, but he was seemingly absolutely very astute listener. Another group of people he would visit, which I was part of, was my mentors or gurus at that time, Asarkan and Tulitin. Tulitin now is a grand name in the history of Russian avant-garde literature at that period, 1970s. He would sit in a Café Artistique opposite MKHAT Theater, Arts Theater of Moscow. And there were a group of people who would come there. They were regulars. They would imagining themselves being in Paris or in London pub, and they had conversation. He would put down their conversation, cut it down into pieces, and then glue it together, substituting certain quotations with the English literature. He was bilingual in English, changing names and characters in foreign literature. So he would create a kind of abstract prose, very funny, untranslatable. Asarkan, his friend, was famous for his self-made postcards. He would chronicle his life by creating little postcard collages and writing in empty spaces the details of his daily life. And he would post them. It was absolutely avant-garde literature, but it was allowed to be posted because that was the law of post office. That there was a stamp, and the postcard would be would get the addressee. So that was kind of resistance to the global culture in the country, the global language. And Joseph Backstein was from time to time present, and these evenings in my flat, which was facing Bolshoi Theater and Bolshoi Theater Square. He never said a word again. He would again listen and making his own, I don't know, conclusions. How he managed, after all, emerge such a powerful figure, creating all these projects, it still was always a mystery for me. First time I saw him after the revolution, we are talking about late 1980s, was in London, when he finally was allowed in London. I organized in Institute of Contemporary Art, ICA, with the help of Lisa Epinianesi, deputy head of ICA at that time, the performance of 10 Russian poets from Moscow in 1989. They'd been performing about a week. And Lisa Epinianesi, who was very much into things, Russian, Freud, etc., she recognized the originality of Kabakov and Eric Bulatov, and it was in cahoots with, in parallel with this performance of avant-garde Russian poets, my friends, whom I hadn't seen for 15 years, because we were not allowed back into Russia. There were exhibition of Emilia Kabakov, Eric Bulatov, Vasiliev, and a number of artists. And that's how I met Emilia Kabakov in 1990, and eventually interviewed him for the magazine Modern Painters in 2007, already in New York, with Emilia present. And what I'm driving at is that then I saw Joseph coming to London almost every year, I assume, quite frequently. And each time we would see each other. And I tried to find out what's happening. I mean, how do you manage it? He said, Zinovy, it's all frightening. I'm totally scared. I'm totally scared. I said, what is it about? No, you don't understand what we are talking about. You don't understand. I said, okay. Then I saw him actually in 2000. In 2000, it was Vladimir Paperny and Svetlana Boym, art historian from Harvard. They organized in all, of all places, but in Las Vegas, was a huge conference called Cold Water, Hot Culture. And Joseph was finally there as a curator. And he even said something. He had his talk during this conference. And there I quoted to him Emilia Kabakov's fantastic idea of him, Ilya, being not living in New York, but living in the space of curators, art critics, and gallery owners. That's the space, Ilya said in his interview to me, that he actually lives in a way. So streets of New York, like a dream for him. It doesn't step on them, only in his imagination, but the real life, in this life of curators, critics, and gallery owners. And otherwise, outside this world, is fear. And that's what Joseph confirmed, that fear, we live in fear. But then there was a trip organized, like an entertainment during this conference, on a big, wonderful, very comfortable bus to the Grand Canyon. The whole, 20 or something participants were driven to this wonderful Grand Canyon to see it. And they've been singing songs, Soviet songs, etc., etc., as kind of nostalgic, absurdist exercise. And then I saw Josip being a kind of clown. He was performing. He shown to all of us these wonderful buses of the size of this room, had a fantastic gangway, and he would show how crocodile speedily moves back and forth. He would lie on his belly, and he would use the tips of his toes and the tips of his elbows moving around along this gangway. And a fantastic speed. I was absolutely amazed by his power and, muscles and gymnastics. And then he sent me a tip from YouTube, where it was circulating on, it was gone viral, this bit, where it was a horrible, kitschy, terrible, already peak of the Putin's rule, Tsereteli, notorious sculptor. It was his jubilee or birthday or something. And he suddenly, Joseph, I see him drinking vodka, stand up in the middle of, of something, the people making speeches. And he started dancing, kind of Russian dance, kind of parody of Russian dance. And he broke this kind of decor of this jubilee ceremonial atmosphere. And then I thought, gosh, he was listening to all we've been talking in my flat on my Thursdays with these witty people, Lieutenant Sarkan, Alec Melamid, and all our friends, all my close friends. Because in my essay, this called Sotsart, it was somehow been dropped eventually. But it was one idea, and it was called meta-yurodstvo in Russian. That is, it was invented at that time. Yurodstvo, it's a religious movement in Russia, in medieval Russia, and they were holy fools. They were allowed to say something which is absolutely forbidden for ordinary people to say to the Tsar. They were kind of fools, Tsar's fools, but they were religious people. They would talk from the perch of the church publicly, and they were allowed to do so. But if you pretend to be a fool, you would be murdered. So if the crowd, if the mob detected that you are false, holy fool, you will be immediately murdered, taken apart, and burned. But it's this idea of a parody of a free gesture that breaks the silence. And if to translate it into, sorry to be complicated, if to translate it into a kind of language of art world or whatever, it's a meta. I added the word meta holy fullness. That is, become a kind of philosophical, general attitude to life in a way, to behavior, to artistic behavior. You use parody, you use, forbidden gestures, blasphemy in a way, in the terms of art world or literature or whatever, to break the silence, to break the ritual, to break ceremony. And then I detected in Josip and Joseph Backstein this streak, which was probably quite remarkable, and it was his way to break this atmosphere of fear that he was surrounded by since Putin's time. I think I can go on miles. I've written many essays and prose and another, but I'll better stop at here.
Thank you very much, Zinovy. This is very interesting. You dropped one story that you told me when we were discussing today's event, and that was a story like back in 1970s when you were very young people. Joseph dragged you out of bed very early in the morning because there was opportunity. Can I just tell the story quickly?
As I said, I lived in very central, at the heart of Moscow, 2 steps from Kremlin, 2 steps from Bolshoi Theater, etc. But it is also around the corner. There was a Kamergersky Periodicals, which was formerly named, in the Soviet times at least, as Mkhat Lane, Arts Theater, what is his name? Stanislavsky Theater. And it was used by the black marketeers selling books. Not necessarily forbidden, but it's sort of hard to get, limited print, and for good money, and sort of half secretly. Definitely they were observed, recorded, etc., but they were allowed to operate. So suddenly I woke up, and that's where my Thursdays, my gatherings, taken place, and sometimes they would run until 4 o'clock in the communal flat, mind you, of which Joseph was talking to Emilia Kabakov. And in this communal flat, there was one room that belonged to me, and we've been sitting till 4 o'clock in the morning. So naturally, I wouldn't get up before 12, and he knew it, but still, he was absolutely adamant, as it turned out, to get from these black marketeers idiotic book, I must say, about Kierkegaard, which was a kind of just non-official figure in the Soviet philosophy at that time. So the book by Kierkegaard, he wanted desperately to buy this idiotic book by some philosopher.
By some existentialist philosopher.
Yes, existentialist philosopher.
Was writing about freedom.
Probably about freedom. Kierkegaard, not exactly about freedom, it is about fear and trembling, which is probably very close to Joseph's soul. It was since then. So it's about fear. It is a famous work of Kierkegaard. Anyway, he woke me up at 9 o'clock. More than that, he had the cheek of asking me for 3 rubles to borrow. 3 rubles is absolutely, it's a fantastic sum of money at that time, because 3 rubles and 12 kopecks would buy you a bottle of vodka, which was a precious sum of money. And he knew that I don't have it. And still he woke me up, because he wanted knowledge, how to deal with fear and trembling.
Thank you so much, Zinovy. This is so interesting. In one of your texts, you mentioned that dissident circles in Soviet Union didn't cross over because they were protecting each other in case that authorities break through one of them. And maybe that a scary briefcase with the scary documents is actually the way of Joseph building democratic institutions for art in the society, in the country where there were no infrastructure for democratic institutions of art. Russia when he was building his projects, Russia didn't have this system of foundations, a system of tax law and institutions. And he was using different circles he knew to build what he built. And he always was bringing his projects to completion. And on that, I would like to pass it to Emilia Kabakov, an old friend of Joseph, who collaborated with him on important projects, and who knows how the way he was working. Emilia, hello. Oh, sorry, Emilia, we can't hear you. Tim, would it be possible to help? Emilia, could you? Yeah, we can hear you now. Thank you.
I know you have a limited time. I will try to be as brief as possible. And I would like to be a little bit more personal because I know a lot of people collaborated with Joseph and can say much more than I do. I left the Soviet Union in 1973, which is much earlier than everybody else, but also my internal immigration started in 1957 when my parents were trying to immigrate and were arrested. So my point of view on Soviet Union always was as an outsider, as an observer, not really a person who lived there. And it's with the same kind of mentality I come to the West. I didn't expect it to be a paradise. I expected to be real life with a lot of problems. And that's how I live, and that's how I operate and work, and my life was just this way. I knew Ilya all my life. I didn't know Joseph before because I didn't belong to Moscow Circle at that time. I did visit Ilya's studio, but only when nobody was there. I was shy in a way. I belonged to music world more than art world. In 1988, 87, mostly 88, 89, 90, a lot of Russian artists start coming. It was a movement, and the West, as usual, accept all these artists as novelty, the same way as they accept later Chinese and Cubans. And it was a paradise. Somebody said, Russians expect a paradise. Yes, they expected a paradise. And for them, the first few years were paradise. Every institution won them. Every institution was doing exhibition. I know that for a fact because I was helping in this exhibition to organize and to see Russian artists through all the problems and difficulties in life which occur very often then because they didn't know reality. In Soviet Union, they create a paradise for themselves. It was a very tight circle of very close friends. They each were telling each other, you're a genius. Nobody tried to criticize very hard because they actually were collectors, art critics, art historians for each other. A difficult situation because they expect the West to accept them the same way. It didn't happen. It did happen in the beginning, but then reality stepped in and created a lot of jealousy, a lot of fights, a lot of distrust. But it didn't happen only to Russians, it happened to everybody, including some American movements and friends in American art. I don't know so much European, but I do know American. In 1989 and 90, Ilya introduced me to Joseph Backstein and asked me to do something with him. At that time, I was trying to work with Korea, and at some point, 1991, I think, if I'm correct, Joseph and I went to Korea. He went from Russia, I went from United States. I represent an American art, he represents Russian artists already. We tried to organize triple exhibition, Korean artists in Moscow and United States, Russian artists in United States and Korea, and American in both places as well. We succeed only on the first part, Koreans in Moscow. The other part, Korean didn't do. But Joseph and I traveled for 3 days in Korea. We got to know each other. We exchanged a lot of comments on Korean art, on Korean mentality, situation we encountered. It was very interesting, very enlightening for me in a way because I didn't know Soviet artists at all, and I didn't know Joseph so well. But we become friends. And next times we met, I don't remember meetings in between so well, and I'm not going to talk about them. But in Venice, and I'm going to say this is kind of personal impression. It's from point of view of woman, and I want to mention Katie. The first time we met together, Katie, Joseph, and I, and Ilya was on the boat. We were traveling together, and that was the beginning of love, which we saw. And Ilya and I decided this is a real. It's going to continue because Joseph was smitten by her. She was shy, she was very nice, but he was just looking at her like she's the center of his world. And from then, our relationship started. Of course, Joseph and Ilya participated together in a lot of dialogues, which was very interesting for me to compare. For example, dialogues with Boris Groys or dialogues with Epstein. Dialogues with Groys always would start one of them talking. Let's say Ilya is talking, and then Joseph and then Boris say, I completely agree with you, but, and then start turning everything upside down. With Epstein, it was like this. They talk non-stop for a few hours, and it was combination of contemporary art, of conceptual ideas, and very domestic, very everyday situation, which Ilya didn't usually touch, even in everyday life. With Joseph, it was stimulation on both sides. It's like, okay, what are we gonna say? And I can beat it. I can say something more outrageous, funnier. It never was exactly very serious. It was a game like the Bisser game. Interesting to watch, interesting to sometimes to participate. I make my remarks. I didn't want to really participate, but I was always there listening to it. As I said, I will try to be very short. Then we start doing exhibition together. Our first exhibition came out of a very interesting episode because it was supposed to be done by somebody else. The other person who slightly offended me verbally. And I went to Joseph and I said, would you like to have retrospective in Moscow? And Joseph said, of course. And that's how it started. I was very glad we did it with Joseph. It was a very real collaboration. It was very complicated, difficult, because at that time, 2008, working in Moscow, in a building that was completely destroyed. It was a bus garage at that time. There was no floor, no doors, no windows, empty spaces. I have to say thank you to Dasha and Roman Abramovich, because if not for them, probably we wouldn't make it financially, we wouldn't make it even bureaucratically, because there was so much bureaucracy there, so many problems. We did it. Joseph was there all the time, every day from morning to evening, and we usually come at 8 o'clock and we leave like whatever, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, the time we think it's finished. It was difficult for him to work. At that moment, I understood bureaucracy of Russian system, which is followed Soviet system, which was a lot of things. Everybody demand bribes. And I flatly refused to do it for many reasons. One of them was, of course, I was afraid to give a bribe. Second, I just morally didn't want to do it. And Joseph and I wouldn't say we didn't fight. We did fight because I want things to be done immediately. Joseph knew it's impossible because he was very much integrated in the Soviet and Russian system. I completely wasn't. I used to work in the West, and I used to situation when artists ask for something, it's delivered. It didn't work this way in Russia. You have to beg, you have to go to authorities, you have to stand on your knees practically, which I wouldn't do, and Joseph had to do this. He has to go, negotiate. He saved situation in many cases, in many moments, and that's thanks to him, we managed to do such a grandiose exhibition, the history, alternative history of art. And then situation with studio. Joseph called me and he said that Russian mafia wants to take over the studio. They demand an enormous amount of money to keep it, and it's probably will be gone. And at that moment, first time, I said, Joseph, would you like, in order to preserve the studio, you do something there, we give it to you, free of charge, whatever, just do whatever you want, but try to preserve it as a studio or something. And Joseph made fantastic work with it. He created this institute with many people I meet now, many people I meet, young curators. That's product of Joseph's imagination, stamina practically, because to create such an ICA in Russia at the moment of all this turbulence, all these changes, was probably impossible. 1990s was difficult, and I don't believe it ever was easy to work there. Many people choose to live and make their career and life in the West, and I admire and respect people who stay, because that was much more difficult to stay and work there. We lost now Bazhanov, and Bazhanov was the first person who called us at 3 o'clock at night. And I pick up the phone because Ilya never pick up the phone. And he said, Ilya, you are selected to represent Russia in Venice Biennale. And despite what some people right now say, there was no discussion that we don't live in Soviet Union, that we practically are American citizens by now. They give him this representation. That was Ilya, not even me, who were invited to represent Russia. The whole conversation was 3 minutes, maybe less, and then it was canceled. Ilya looked at me, I looked at him. Ilya said, what was it? I said, that was all money they have, because Bazhanov said, you are choose to represent, but we don't have some money. So they everything have money only for this conversation. I'm right now talking about Bazhanov also because we lost a grandiose guy together with Joseph, 1 year difference, and Russia keep losing great artists, great people who, through all these years, kept art alive, help artists, make them what it is. For Joseph to establish not only this art center in Moscow, not only being creator of Biennale, and in the beginning it's practically, I don't know how he made it. I don't know if anybody else has, guts to actually do this grandiose program. A lot of artists was telling me how they went from one location to another in the snow, a lot of collectors. He brought the West to Moscow, not only to buy art, but to look at art, to understand that there is an art scenery, there are artists there, and they worth coming and they worth spending time to, walking in the snow, going to all the strange, not really for art spaces, but look at the art. It wasn't money, it was art. It was only about art and artists. And that's the main thing that Joseph did for Russia and for Russian artists. He created art scenery and the empty space. He created not art market, but art world, which at the beginning wasn't there. I'm not talking about different circles of artists. I'm talking about grandiose art scenery, which was accepted by the West, which brought different curators, very famous, like Jean-Hubert Martin, Bardi Byers, from the West to Russia. They participated in everything Joseph did. They did exhibition there, and they started inviting Russian artists, because he told them and he showed them how it's possible to seriously look at Russian art and accept it on the same level like the Western art. That's one of the best things he did for Russia. And sometimes we judge very harshly people who stay even now in Russia because of all the situation. But I left. I didn't have guts to stay. I didn't want to stay. But I do know that it's impossible to just separate world in black and white. And maybe it takes more courage to stay there right now and stay there in 1990s and 80s than to live. To change the world there, like Joseph did, like Bazhanov did, and many artists and many other people, then take an easier way and be here and just live your life. And I want to finish on this, because I know you have a lot of speakers. I know there were many people who worked with him more than I did. Ilya is not here. I still didn't get over his death. I probably never will. I know Katie feels the same right now. And I just want to tell her, I understand everything that you feel, and I admire the way you continue what he did. You're creating all these things for him right now in his memories, archive, documentation, even this panel. And thank you for your efforts. I know how important it is, not only for Joseph, but for every artist, for every person who worked with him, and how important it is for Russian history of art. And that's it I want to say. Thank you.